Coming to you live from the old Benny's on Court Street. Somehow the sliding door was open and we made ourselves home in here at the Benny's on Court Street. Here's the Greg Simoneau Show. Here's Greg Simoneau. Thanks. Thanks. This used to be a Benny's. Thanks to Dan in the booth. Oh. Thanks to the local scene for having me. Local scene. Enjoy the show. So I was wondering the other day, how much does an elephant cost? You know? And I asked Google and it said, well, between 15 and 20K. I was like that cat emoji, shocked. Huh? That's more than like 100 cats would cost you. And also, wait, do elephants snore? That would be a big point for me. Also, have you ever seen an elephant sleeping? Yeah, but not as much as I'd like. But you really shouldn't be owning an elephant. Yeah, that's what Google said. And I was like, oh, okay, because of the upkeep and everything. And they were like, well, that, and because, you know, it's like illegal, especially in the States to own one. I don't know what else you want to know. It's going to take a lot of space. It's going to keep growing. It's going to take a lot of upkeep. And a young elephant, it depends on the age. A young elephant will be a little more expensive. And an old elephant will obviously be a little cheaper. So if you want to save money. So I'm like, yeah, that's great, whatever. And then they're like, this is Google. It's like, poachers sell the ivory for so much a pound. Big bucks bonanza. And I'm like, I don't like that. I don't like them hurting them elephants. Then they said, you know, you can, if you have an elephant, and in its lifetime, you know, if you charge people to look at it, over its lifetime, 1.75, over $1 million you could bring in. So, okay, that's a 20 grand investment. And you could make $1 million if, you know, 1 million people pay you $1 to see it. And I remember this at the Barnstable County Fair years ago. I don't think they let you do this anymore, but I don't know why I wanted to, but I did. I rode an elephant for $5. It was $5 to ride it, and the Polaroid picture? Possibly, something like that. Whatever it was, and I rode him. And it was fun, but it was scary. You're high up, and his ears flapped on your legs, you know, which I really didn't like that texture, you know. I didn't like the texture of the ear flaps on my legs. Like, we don't put my niece on my cousin's shoulders and let his ears flap on her legs, you know. We call him Dumbo because he's dumb. But it was the experience, you know. I felt bad for the elephant, you know, not because of my weight or anything. I just felt bad for him, you know. I'm like, well, you're here, might as well walk around a little bit. Here's your $5. Mind if I take a photo with you? Yeah. But he wasn't nude, you know. Elephant nudes. That's the next big thing to make money on. Hey, I don't just read Nat Geo for the articles. National Geographic magazine for those Nat, not in the Geo. No. He wasn't like nude. He had like a carpet over his back, and you sat on the carpet. So there's probably a name for that carpet. It's just not coming to me right now. Elephant carpet? But he was a full grown. He was an old one. So there's still, they probably already made their million, you know. You wouldn't have guessed that by their clothes or overall appearance that they were rich, though, you know. They must have put a lot of that million back into the elephant because they were not looking good. And then Google was saying, you can eat elephant. And I was like, really? That meat? That looks like the toughest meat imaginable. You know, I usually don't gauge meat while it's still alive. But in this case, it looks very tough. It just does. And Google was like, yeah, gorilla, elephant, any like woodsy creature, that's called bushmeat. And I was like, bushmeat? That sounds derogatory. Yeah, you guys want to get something to eat later? Get some bushmeat? That sounds rude. Rude, sir. What are these hamburgers made out of? Beef and 5% beef, 95% bushmeat. Gross. And I was like, geez, bushmeat. And then I got a flashback of when I was a kid. And when I was over these kids' house across the street, and I was little, and I'm pretty sure it was the first time I ever saw a woman's bush. I might have seen my birth mother's bush when I was being born. I don't remember if I gave a quick look back. Ew, gross. But this picture I saw her as a little kid. This was the 80s, okay? So this photo, it was a little old. And it was in black and white, and it was in a book, like a Danielle Steele paperback book. You know what I mean? Like a thick book. And this must have been before she became Danielle Steele. This was when she was Danielle Bush. It wasn't just like a Playboy magazine. It was in a book. It was black and white, paper pages. So this is awkward. Somehow they got me in there and they showed me, you know. And I'm sure this photo set up the story somehow, but they didn't offer to read it to me. But she had a big old bush. And that was true to form for the 70s and 80s, you know. It was the style then. So when I heard the word bushmeat on Google the other day, my mind immediately went back to that. Yarr. Jeez. I was scared as a kid. A paper photo of a lady's vagina. Not the vagina, just her bush. And it wasn't even like a sexy photo. She was just like happening to be walking around her bed with her head down, you know. And you caught a little shot of the bush. In a book, you know, a candid, an action photo. I don't know. No matter how many used bookstores I go to, I still can't track it down. For the context. I want to know for the context. You know. The cashiers never know which book I'm explaining to them, you know. It's like I'm in crazy town trying to track this book down. You never heard of the Bush Lady? Bush by the sea? Shake that bush? I'm the biggest Danielle Bush fan out there. How have you not have this? That's a little glimpse of me in the bookstore. Bush by the sea? How do you not have this? Was it an autobiography? I don't know. That was a shocking image. Well, that lady has a bush. And a lot of people would say, well, that was a big old bush. A black hairy bush. Then I probably just got on my bike and drove home. And you know something we don't talk about a lot when you're driving a bike is how come, you know, when the way a bike shakes sometimes when you're riding it. Like, what is going on there? You know, are the shocks out of alignment? What's going on there? Are you driving over some rough terrain? Like, that's how you know it's rough terrain. Either that or there's something wrong with the bike. When a bike shakes. I don't like that. Nobody really talks about it. We go on and on about women's bushes, but not really on bikes shaking. My bike shakes brings all the boys to the yard, and they're like, it's better than yours. Damn right, it's better than yours. I can teach you, but I have to charge. Yep. My bike shakes. Did you have a good bike ride? Yeah. Did your bike shake at all? Did you get the shakes? Did you ever ride a bike and get, you know, you get the shakes? My bike has the Harlem Shakes. I have a friend who fell off a bike recently, you know. Shout out to him. Sorry about your fall. It just happened, you know, where he ran into the bike in front of him and fell off and onto his elbow. But I'm like, you know, if he could have hit the other person's bike and then the bike shakes, you know, like something took over the bike, something like it had a computer control where it would stabilize, you know, that could be a stabilizer. And that could be an invention for Shark Tank, right? With the bike stabilizer, are we thinking AI? I don't know. Computer-induced shake? I mean, the bike shake. I mean, we already have AI in the tires. AIR. 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 A joke about air. The R version of AI. Did we just rebrand air? I don't know. Something to think about. Yeah, it's the summertime, and you're going to go to a lot of parties. And sometimes you're out there, and you're like, this isn't mentioned enough. Is there a dessert menu? And if you know me, you know I like a good dessert menu, but it's not brought up enough. It's like, why aren't people offering dessert menus for their house? I know people will joke and say, "This is what's on the menu tonight at home." Yeah. But what do we do? What do we have for dessert? Then they just ramble it off like it's the specials. I mean, how hard is it to write this down? You know, maybe a nice font. You know, I know. I know. You have a computer. You have a printer. We aren't utilizing our printers that much. And if we are, it's not for the right reasons. One of the reasons is because the ink costs so much. Yeah, you want to save on ink, you know. But is there a dessert menu? Sometimes you go to a restaurant and I will, you know, and I'll sit there and I'll eat something and then I'll be like, "Is there a dessert menu?" And they'll be like, "Oh no, we don't have a dessert menu, but we do have chocolate cake and stuff like that." Okay. You own a friggin' restaurant. I know you're not like a chain, like a nice reputable place. But I mean, like, how hard is it to print something? You know? Is there a dessert menu I could look at? I mean, I need something tangible, legible, edible. I want to read it. You know, maybe that will be my next thing. I collect stuff, you know. Maybe I'll collect dessert menus. I recently purchased a dessert menu recovered from the Titanic movie set. Craft services. Signed by Leo DiCaprio. Stand-in. Very nice guy. Not a valuable signature, but still a valuable human being for giving me that somewhat rare dessert menu. So, the Kingston Mall. I don't know if you guys were up there last week. Yeah. They had a car show, like an old car show, and I was there. And it's very rare you see a car at the mall, let alone a car show. I was walking around the cars, and they let you go in some of them, and that was nice. And they weren't classic cars. They were old cars, like my car, like a 2016 Honda CR-V. And I was in there, and someone came over to me, and they said, hey, get out of there. Get out of this car. And I was startled, you know. And I said, what? Car show, right? And they were like, no. Car show is on the other side of the mall. This is just where everyone parked for the car show. And I was like, oh, this is where the Gatra bus dropped me off. I didn't see that, you know. So I went over to the other side. And there was, in fact, some nice classic cars, but you couldn't touch them. Gatra's new slogan should be, instead of, you know, give us a week, we'll take off the weight. Sorry, that's not Gatra. It's give us a wave, we'll pick you up. So instead of that shouldn't be their slogan. Their new slogan, or the slogan should be, give us a wave and we'll drop you off at the wrong car show. We'll drop you off wherever the hell we want. We'll show you the most boring car show you've ever imagined. And that's what you get for wanting to look at cars. You're Gatra people now. We own you. Anyways, that's kind of a long slogan. But both car shows ended up being interesting. Then I went to a boat show. and I was going around and looking at all these boats and going in them. And some of them were kind of broken and stuff. And someone came over to me and said, "Hey, get out of there. Get out of there. Get out of that boat." And I was like, "What? Boat show?" And they were like, "No, this isn't a boat show. This is a boat junkyard. This is a boat tow. We tow the boats here to be fixed." And I was like, oh, sorry. I thought this was a boat show. And there's just not enough boat shows and car shows around for people who can't afford the boats and hose lifestyle. Some of us have hose, but not boats. And some of us are the hose. Anyways, Kingston had the car show. Well, the mall had it. The mall that has nothing now has car shows. No, but shout out to all the businesses in the mall now. Good on you guys for staying there. And good luck to the new businesses opening all the time there. God bless you, businesses, with God's blessings. Wait, that's the public access church shows material. Sorry about that. No. The church show will be back at right after this. It sounds soul-saving. I don't know if I'm supposed to give the schedule. I don't know if I'm supposed to give that out. The other day, I was just out mowing my yard, The wind blew some trash by, and I was like, what is that? What's in my yard? And it was a box. Then I went to McDonald's, and I was like, do you have like a kid's meal? Do you have something like something that's kind of fun? And what does that include? And then she gave it to me, and she handed me a box. Then I ordered something online, and it came to my house, and I was like, this isn't its package. I noticed it laying there. It wasn't its package because it was in a box. And when I was a kid, I liked to hide, play in cardboard. It was fun. I was smaller. I could fit, hide, nap. And people saw this and would always offer like, "Hey, Greg, do you want this?" "Sure, what is it?" And they'd say, "It's a box." Then we were supposed to be watching our cousin, and we thought we'd have fun with him. So we put him in the big refrigerator package, and we sent him down the stairs. And he went down the stairs, and he cried, and then gave his feedback. And I was like, "What part didn't you enjoy?" And he said, "The part where I rode down the stairs in a box." I like to entertain at kids' parties. Relatives, nieces, and nephews are present. They're having birthdays. And I'm like, "Hey, guys, why don't you face each other and pair off?" And they say, "What are we going to do?" And I say, "You're going to box." A lot of talk about bushes and boxes tonight. And that whole thing, that was a box set. The Canadian wildfires, they were started by a bird. And my wife told me this. And we both want to be Canadian at this point anyways. I have Canadian heritage, but yeah. The bird dropped a fish on some power lines. And this just shows you that birds aren't real. They devised this wildfire so that they can smog out our summer here in Plymouth. The wildfires in Canada sent the smog down to us, ruining our summer. The birds aren't real. And if you ever caught a bird and you noticed it, well, first of all, you can't catch birds in Canada. That's illegal. But catching a bird in Canada is illegal. And if you did and you grabbed it and you turned it over its belly, it would say, "Made in China," because it's a robot. And because the Canadian birds are robots. So you know why birds aren't real too? Have you ever seen a bird sleep? Not really. Never seen them sleep. Well, not at least not too much at least. Not as much as I'd like. So this bird dropped a fish and it hit some power lines and there were sparks everywhere. And not that WNBA sparks. Girls from that team, their convention was down the street. Real sparks that started a fire. And that makes me wonder too, are fish real? You know? Have you ever seen a fish sleep? Not really. Not too much. Less than they should be. So the Canadian wildfires were started by a robot bird that dropped a fake fish to ruin our summer. Yeah. So then the other day, I was walking around, and they are building more houses in my area, in my community. And we're walking around this just big dirt, open areas, just all dirt, unfinished stuff, just all dirt areas, like sand dunes. And we saw coyotes. Ooh. So I immediately picked up a rock, and my wife picked up a rock, much smaller than mine, and I said, "Way to go, bringing a pebble to a rock fight." And I was like, yeah, if they come at me, I'll probably use this rock. And this was the only thing I could think of, I wish I had some pepper spray or something, maybe some bush meat, maybe a walking stick. I always used to have a walking stick, but not the ones you buy in a store and that are all polyurethane and everything. And those are like $200. And I mean, I want safety, but at what cost, I'll just grab a free one if I look hard enough. I'll find one. Yeah. And if those coyotes attack, I'll be ready for them. I'll be wearing my Obi-Wan Kenobi robe, with the head pulled down a bit. Ooh, ooh. I'll scare them away. I'll learn the Force. I want to learn the Force too, for my late night walks. And I forgot to mention there's sand people and Jawas too there, so we've got to be careful. And then otherwise, I'll just use the stick, and I'll remember if they attacked, I'll hit them, right? And if I broke the walking stick, it would probably would break, even though it was $200. It would probably break right in half, or maybe leave me with like a little bit, and I would just be there on my back, last ditch effort, just half a walking stick like this. And I would look at the half that I had, maybe less than a half, and it would say LL Bean on that half, And I would just stab them in the stomach one last time in an attempt to free myself, just using half of a $200 walking stick. Not even half. Like $80 worth, $70 worth of the stick. Yeah. Would be $70 worth would be useful at that point. And as I was taking my final breath, I'd say to the coyotes, "Sorry we took your land." A baby cries in the distance, That's what the name of this third edition of this comedy album will be. Greg Simoneau, A Baby Cries in the Distance. Yeah. Sorry about your land. Tell the HOA to name the new pool house after me. No. So, obviously, I didn't have to fight them. I'm here, I'm doing the show. And if I did fight them, then I was obviously victorious, right? So I think this comedy album should be, me holding a dead coyote in the air, AIR version, you know. Maybe its head ripped off, just holding the head up in the air, like a very rock and roll album art cover, you know. And I think the title is either going to be Bushmeat, you know, Greg Simoneau, Bushmeat. Or Greg Simoneau, how much does an elephant cost? We'll be out in stores soon. And then the re-release will be called Greg Simoneau, Coyote Hunter. Yeah. And you can catch me in the upcoming film Car Show 2000. And Danielle Bush will be played by the talented, the beautiful Florence Pugh. And that old grump that kicked me out of the car show will be played by, you guessed it, Kingston's own Chris Cooper. All right. Well, thanks. We'll see you next time. Bye. And remember, please rewind this episode for the next person. And now it's time for Breakdown. Never gonna get it. Never gonna get it. Never gonna get it.
There's nothing like you've seen.
My message to my parents on them understanding my comedy.
Them man never been ready for the chaos. I stay ready, never take day off. Train for the action, it's payoff. Deliver that straight, no mailbox. First class talker, top tier walker. Back in my chat, these dark roads I navigate that.